Last episode, we talked about when the job starts to feel different, when something shifts and you start noticing it. I think the next step from that is what happens after. Not when someone's completely burned out, but when that thought starts creeping in. I don't know if I want to do this forever. So I'll start with this. What actually makes someone start thinking about leaving the job? What actually makes someone start wanting to leave or thinking about leaving this job? Anybody?
I would say in the beginning, it's for us, like schedules, family time. In our career field, 90% of the time, your first shift is overnight. Like you're working overnights, and then you got to work your way up. So at first, it's like, well, I work overnights, I work weekends, I don't get to see my family. I don't know if this is much. And then you're getting your paycheck, which really, you're like, oh, okay, this is nice. What am I going to do next week? So I think at first it's that. And then you start building those stressors of the calls, sometimes the equipment, sometimes where you're working, the administration, whether that be from city council, county commissioners down to your sergeant or whatever the person above you is. So I think it starts with schedules and pay, and then you buy in a little bit, and you're like, what? Nights and weekends, I get to see the good stuff. And then as it goes on, you're like, wait a second, this isn't paying right. Then it's to the calls, and can I do this? Can I mentally continue seeing what I see every day? And so I think it's like a buildup of things.
Yeah, I would agree. In EMS, the work-life balance is trash. When I first started in EMS, I had no social life. I immediately went to nights. I was immediately on weekends. Our schedule was built on a seniority list. So you earned seniority based on time in. So I had 0 points, and I was on the bottom rung. So I worked every weekend. I was on nights. And sure, you're exactly right. When you're on weekends, you were on nights. So you had all those, quote, fun calls. You got the trauma. But let's be real. Once you've seen one GSW, you've seen them all. So the glory of that tends to kind of quickly wear off. So you have to look at that a little bit differently from a perspective and shift that diagram if from a leadership point of view, and really shift scheduling and look at an alternate scheduling perspective and get these younger generations. I don't know if it looks like a alternating weekend, a shifting to where days and nights. I don't know what it looks like, but it definitely needs to be a shift where a work-life balance so that people can have time so that they can still enjoy those calls and we can build on education, but also have a social life beyond the job.
It's what is what I'm doing worth what I'm getting paid? And I feel like a lot of that nowadays is more financially driven than anything. 15 years ago, more of is this a good work-life balance? Does this, make me happy? Can I do the things that I want to do with my life? Is there promotions? What's that ladder look like? Where with as bad as inflation has gotten in prices and everything, people have to physically now look at and say, is what I'm doing worth the paycheck that I'm getting? Can I afford gas? Can I afford groceries? How many extra jobs am I going to have to pick up? How much, and I think you spoke about it a couple of episodes ago. You talked about overtime, right? Overtime now is almost a mandatory thing in EMS and not mandatorily required by the providers, but mandatory to make ends meet and bills day to day. And so I feel like a lot of people now are leaving because that dollar bill is a little bit higher somewhere else. Because you have to know, and we'll leave. We have firefighters that leave. I'm sure officers leave, EMS, all three probably different reasons at some point. But we'll have a lot of, we'll have a couple of people leave here now and then, and they'll go to a different department locally. And it's, the grass is not greener on the other side. But if that dollar bill is just a little bit more and I can do a little bit less on my day off, then maybe it's worth putting up with the same exact thing because I'm making X amount more.
Yeah. And nobody leaves for $2 or $3 an hour.
No.
They don't.
No.
It's what's their time off? What's their work life, their social life going to be? I mean, I'm seeing it literally today, it's, $3,000 or $4,000 a year, but the grass seems greener over there, which it may be. And I, happy for the individual, but they don't leave for $2 or $3 an hour. It doesn't happen.
And they usually call you and say, it's the same, but I'm getting paid more.
Yes. Or I have more time off, or I have it.
Yeah. It's the same work, but I'm getting paid more.
Yeah.
And so is this gradual, or do you think this happens like over time, or does it hit instantaneously where people realize, whoa, I made a mistake?
I would say there's a point where it's instantaneous, and then that kind of fades, and then it becomes gradual. Like there is a moment where you're like, F this, like I said earlier, nights, weekends, this, it. And then it's like, okay, well, hold on. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like 3-4 years from now, I'm going to be one of those senior people that, I can get the good shift. And then it's like, you've accepted that. And so now it's, what else can I find? And as you dig, you're like, okay, hey, now I'm 10 years into this, and I realize that it's not all it's cracked out to be because of X, Y, and Z. And now I want to go. And then I'm sure we'll get into later, this is all we know. So now we're going to do.
And that's another point too. It's like, I've done this. Now I'm at this bridge point. I've got X more years to retirement. Do I leave and go do something else? It's not so much this is all I may know how to do, but I've done it for 50% of my pension. I've got to stay here for the other 50% to make that pensionable time. I know for like police and firefighters and things like that, that's sometimes a thought that goes in their head, and one of the biggest things, we're going to talk about too, is do you think people lie to themselves about being checked out?
Oh yeah.
You think so?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they try to convince themselves like, oh, I still love this. I still want to do it. And there are a lot of days that I do want to wake up and do it. I do want to, I do love my job. This morning I got to spend 4 hours with an elementary school. Part of my duties is I ride a horse for work. And so part of that is going to a school, and I got to go do that this morning. If you'd have told me I had to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning for anything else, I'd be like, nope, I don't want to do that. But a day like today, like, yeah, let's do it. So there are days that I still want to do it, but there are many days that I convince myself like, no, I still like this. I still, it just depends on kind of the direction of things at that time with your job and what's going on in the world and what's going on at your agency.
I think for different agencies, it's different. I think in EMS, I think it's probably goal driven. I think for different people, it's based on their goals and, where they want to see themselves in the future. Some people may want to see themselves in leadership positions, so they may set themselves up for that place, so they may plant themselves there. Others may sit back, see where that place may end up, and then others may sit tight, see what one place is headed versus another, and they kind of hop, skip, and a jump. One versus the other is kind of what I've sat back and watched over the years. I spent 20 years at my first agency. That's unheard of. You don't see a paramedic spend 20 years at one particular agency. I was very dedicated to my first agency. My dad was at his agency for 30. The next place I went to, I was there for 2 years, and it just wasn't for me. I've been at my current place of employment for 14 months. I would, and Justin, you spent some time on the ambulance. I would be interested to see what your perspective is, sitting back, just conversating with other paramedics and EMTs, just the chatter that I hear back and forth. We're really just money driven just because it's really kind of hard to support a family on a paramedic and EMT salary. Most EMTs, especially, sit below the poverty line. Like the story that I shared, I believe, in our first episode, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine and how she carried a lot of shame on having to care for her son on food stamps and to supply her daycare on that. And I told her, don't hold that shame, that the space that she carried for her patients was invaluable. That's embarrassing to say that we're frontline healthcare workers and we're living below poverty. That shouldn't be happening. The healthcare industry should not be something that doesn't support frontline healthcare workers.
So why do people stay in that position then? Why do you have people that have longevity in EMS agencies? Like you said you spent 20 years, correct, at your first agency? So what kept you there? What was the thing that kept you instead of going somewhere else?
Because I don't believe that anybody would answer that call. And Saturday's my last full-time day. And I just had a conversation on my way here with my husband, and I struggle with it, wondering if I made the right decision, because I listen to the burnout with my coworkers, because they struggle with the turnover and the high call volume, because I wonder about, they struggle with, the everyday answering of the call, and if they're making the right decisions, because it is a demanding call, just like it is. You always want to be at your best for everyone on their worst day. Just like when you're answering, I would imagine answering the door on a domestic. I mean, I don't want to assume what it's like to be in law enforcement, just in fire suppression. It's an important role that we all play, and especially when we come together in three, it's very important. But especially in EMS, when I believe last I saw we were at 16 or 1,700 calls and we're only in April, that's very demanding in the community that I work. So with Saturday being my last full-time day, it's almost a feeling of abandonment to my second family and my identity. So it's crazy that this is our episode today that we're talking about, and I'm in that shift personally. So it's causing me to, Kate would love it. It's causing me to do some personal self-reflection and question, where I'm at personally. But I've been in it so long that I care because it's what I was called to do, and now I have to find out what I'm going to do next. But I care because who else is going to do it?
Yep. So for you all, law enforcement wise, why does someone stay even when they know they don't want to be there? What keeps them there?
One thing is we get to drive fast, we get to fight people. Like we get to do all these cool things.
Carry a
So like
gun.
there is that aspect of it. And for me, the times that I've been like, is this for me? Something always cool happens. And I'm like, okay, hey, this is why I do this, right? But I think a lot of it is, and I've had these conversations with my partners of, we've been doing it so long. We don't know that we can do anything else. I left
Yeah.
law enforcement for a short period of time, went and made way, way more money. And all I caught myself doing was talking to my crew that I was working on power lines. I was talking to my crew. Oh, tell us this story. Tell us about this. And I'm like eating it up. Like, oh yeah, so I've done this and I've done this and this is crazy. And when you're out of it, you reflect on those and you talk about them, how cool it is and how, all the cool things you got to do.
Talked yourself back into it.
And I talked myself back into it. But I realized when I did that, I was like, man, I love this job. Take all the other stuff out of it and think of all the fun stuff that you really get to see that the world doesn't get to see, whether it be good or bad. Like, and it goes back to that, like, who's going to do it? But I think that's why cops stay, is it's like, we've invested so much into this. I got friends that have degrees and other stuff, and they're like, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know if I know how to do that. This is the only thing I know.
Yeah.
It's us convincing ourselves that we got to stay, but
it's almost like you get this like meter and it gets to the very bottom and then you have to kind of slowly refill it with.
You have to fill your glass back up.
You got to fill your glass back up with something that's either, and it doesn't have to be, driving fast or chasing foot chase, but it could be, you got to take the horse today to the elementary school, right? And so your emotional meter gets filled back up. Or some kid walks up to us and says, hey, look, firefighter, do you have any stickers? And you're going to hand a sticker out, right? Just any of those things are going to build that back up or fill that glass. And I feel like that's the main reason. Like for us, we look at it and there's always that, with fire and EMS, there's that, or fire and police, there's that pension, that kind of that carrot that dangles in front of you. And you're like, I have X amount of years I have to be here to make this work for me. But on the backside of it, we stay here because we enjoy it. Yeah. We truly do. And even when the job's not quote unquote right for us, we find some way to convince ourselves to stay in it. And if you get out of it, then someone ends up in either EMS or security, or you're always constantly touching that profession some way. Yeah. So is it a mental or a physical checkout when it first starts happening for EMS and for law enforcement? What would you say?
I would say,
what do we see first?
In law enforcement, I would say it's physical, because like I said last episode, sleeping, you're working the night shift or, whatever it may be, you get all this crazy stuff and you're just exhausted. And so physically you're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, these hours, this schedule, or whatever it may be. And then once you get into 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it becomes the mental side of it. You're going to hit walls throughout this career. Every so often you're going to hit a wall and say, hey, is this it? Like, do I need to be doing this? And so I think in the beginning it's physical, because you are not used to, for y'all, an alarm goes off in the middle of the night and you got to get up and you got to go. And then those alarms may not stop. They may just keep going. So then you don't get rest, and everything we talk about, taking it out on your family, all this stuff, and you're just exhausted. So it becomes physical. And then the mental side of it sets in, for us. So I think in the beginning it's one thing, and then later in the career it becomes a little bit different.
Follows.
I think for EMS providers, as far as, checking out, it's probably a combination of both. I think they check out both physically and mentally. Historically, EMS providers have you know, not physically taking care of themselves and mentally have not taken care of themselves. And but they haven't been taught how to do that either. And they need an example. You can't expect them to if they haven't been taught. I was never taught how to do that. You know, I wasn't ever taught, wasn't given tools.
Yeah.
I had terrible habits. You
It,
know,
it's cram energy
yeah,
drinks, nicotine.
yeah.
But
You know,
that's if you don't ever teach somebody, if
yeah,
you don't ever
nobody ever
they go
taught
down that.
me.
I mean,
Yeah.
Second of the day there.
When I had a horrible call, I might have had a supervisor just came up and told me to just suck it up and get back out there. Or I was told to go out to a bar and drink it off, or just it was terrible coping skill, if anything. Or just I remember after a call going to a gas station and puking, and the Loves kid asked me if I was okay. It was a horrible experience.
Good.
Absolutely terrible.
Give me 5 minutes.
I was like 22 years old. It was absolutely horrific. It just horrible. And so, I mean, the checkout in EMS starts very young in their career, which is why I think the turnover rate is just flipping. And as I see coworkers throughout the area that we work in, I don't recognize any of them. In the short time that I interact, I recognize no one.
Yeah.
Which is why I believe there's just such a high turnover rate in EMS, which is why we're just not seeing them stay in it, because they're not in it to win it.
For us, it's more, I think firefighters wise, especially with 24-hour shifts, and it ties back to EMS too, and it probably officers as well, but call volume, I think is a big one. And you said physical versus emotional or mentally checking out. I think what happens is we start seeing that society is growing. Society is getting older, right? A majority of our population is older versus younger. At this point, we're reaching a crescendo at some point, and it's 911 is being utilized more and more and more. People aren't, and we always joke about this. We're like, man, I really wish they had some life skills class, and like 6 weeks of it was when to call 911, right? Yep. Not saying don't call 911, do it if you feel it, but like, toe hurt, go to the doctor. You broke your arm, go to the urgent care or the ER. Things like that. Kind of when should I use all these services? So I think as call volumes increase nationwide, there's that 24 hours. You're waking up and you wake up and you're going to toe pain that's been going on for 7 hours or 7 days. Or I've got a fever. Okay, have you tried any Tylenol or Motrin or anything? No, I've got a fever. I need to go to the hospital. Or during COVID, it was really intense because it was like, I'm going to call 911 because I know I can get back to the ER faster if I go through an ambulance. Yeah. And it's like I almost wanted to hand out pamphlets that said, you're not going to get in faster.
You're going to lay in the hallway bed.
Take a ticket. Yeah, here's your ticket for your J. Spinney pickup for your catalog over here. But I think that's a big thing is that as that calls increase and we start, you wake up or interrupt sleep, we start having cortisol issues, we start having testosterone issues, hormone issues just all across the board, females and males. And I think a lot of that stuff, that physical issue, like you said, you see it physically first. And then as you impact hormones and other things within our body, just our circadian rhythm itself, then the mental part starts creeping in on us. And then we get more irritated, our fusers become short, and we find bad coping mechanisms. Or, like you said, you lay in bed 2 days on, 5 days off. I don't want to do a damn thing for 5 days. And so I think for fire, probably EMS is the same, is as we're seeing these calls increase and we're not seeing any lights at the end of the tunnel, it's just every year it's more and more and more and more, but nothing from, certain entities, leadership positions. We're out there fighting, all cities are fighting to get more and more for their people. We'd like to hope that they have the best interest for us, but sometimes they don't see it. And I feel like that's for us, it's the physical and then the mental. You get tired, and then you're just cranky and you're pissed all the time. So with that, so what's the difference between a 5 and a 20-year person leaving? What would you say? If someone has 20 years and they leave, how's it viewed versus someone has 5 years and they leave? Outside looking in.
Outside looking in.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that in our jobs, like somebody leaves in 5 years and everybody's like, oh, they just weren't cut out for it. They just weren't cut out for it. They said it was their family time or they're this or that, but they couldn't handle the job. To where a 20-year person, everybody's like, man, they did 20 years, you automatically assume they retired, and it's never usually, to me, the 5-year guy that's leaving, he's figured it out. He's figured out that this isn't good for my family. This isn't good for, I'm not getting paid a whole bunch. I found something that gives me better time off, because quality of life is what's important to that 5-year guy. And so I respect the guy that comes in, 3, 4, 5 years and is like, hey, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
And then for the 20-year guy, I'm like, for some reason, I always look at it this way. Like, if somebody says, hey, I'm retired this agency, I'm like, man, I wonder what that guy's seen. Like, I immediately have that, like, I can only imagine, like, especially when they're like, oh, 30 years ago. I'm like, 30 years ago was like, it was Wild West. So I automatically feel for them. I'm like, man, what'd you see? You don't have a lot of what we have now. And knowing some of those guys, they didn't treat themselves the way we do. We're able to now. So that's my perspective. And I think that's how other people think of that.
Tacking on that, with the 20-year, you start looking at those individuals that were, 20, 30 years ago. I start thinking about what events we've had historically happen in Oklahoma. You have some of these individuals that are retiring that went through May 3rd tornado, or even the 2013 tornado, or that was more recent than not. But then you start thinking about the bombing.
I was going to say, if you go back even 5 more years, the bombing.
Yeah. It's like you see these people and you're like, you stayed 35 years or 40 years and you made it through all of this stuff, even though 9/11 wasn't a local for us, but still your first responders, that was a huge shake to the community. Just everyone, police, fire, and EMS all lost a lot. 343 firefighters died going into a building, knowing that they weren't going to come out.
Yeah. And
you see that stuff and you're like, you committed for X amount of years. And then we look at, you said the 5-year guy, and it's like, he's just cutting out for it, or the 5-year paramedic. Oh yeah, they couldn't hang. They couldn't stand seeing trauma and all this stuff, whatever. They're weak. I feel like sometimes we proverbially eat the young, and not young as an age, but young as in time.
Yeah.
And you're right. They figured it out. They cracked the code. It was not right for them. And they got out before they got either bitter, complacent, angry, or worse, developed some kind of mental health problems.
Yeah. Or made a bad decision.
Yes.
That ends poorly for somebody.
Yeah. Patient, or, whoever they're interacting with, or themselves.
I think in EMS, the difference between a medic that's been established for 20 to 30 years versus 5 years, probably from a leadership or managerial perspective versus a teammate perspective. From a manager is just a number. From the team, it's just a number to them. It's just a seat that they have to fill.
Oh, you hear that quite a bit. I think on all 3 agencies, there's 40 more people knocking the door to take your spot.
And they're not. You
No.
can tell me
There's
that all day.
nobody
Like, they're
knocking.
not.
Hiring classes
Yeah.
we filled up a huge entire, an auditorium twice over for our testing. And then
Yeah.
10, 15 years later, it's like a small room.
Yeah.
The the team that's out there answering the call, to us, we're out answering the call, taking care, flipping the cot. If someone leaves, it's just more. It's just faster that we have to get out there and meet the need and go and to me personally, that's not okay. You know, I'll go when I'm there, but it's not something that I would look forward to. It would be something that I would ask those that have ambition to fulfill that role, that they would come to the table and look for change and see how we could work together to change that culture, because it's something that definitely needs to change. Because right now EMS just feels like numbers. Because I would say that the difference between a 20, 30-year paramedic choosing to step away versus someone that just was into 3 to 5 years, they were just numbers. When I left at 20 years at my first agency, I had more that were established at the fire side embrace me, because I had more established relationships there. Because the turnover rate on my EMS side was so much higher.
Yeah.
Because I had those relationships. Because there's not that turnover rate.
Yeah, it's rare. I mean, it's rare for us to really leave.
Because you
Most times
guys don't leave because you have the pension and the retirement.
And they get to take naps and get paid for it.
I
But
knew,
I mean,
I knew it was coming. I can ride a horse and run and chase people.
Because when I left,
Well, people who's excited to see us when they show up on
You
scene.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
because
I mean-
when I left, the chief
Not you
found
all.
out about it, and he sent out a email that says, "Hey, Danielle's leaving.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on. This is not a good thing." And they all came to tell me goodbye.
Yeah.
We're losing, and that's not for me to brag, but it's to show proof that, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
We're losing this. We don't want to lose this. So this is where we need to invest in. This is where we need to try to change this and grow our EMS side somehow, whether it be through education. I believe that we need to put value in our education process. We need to validate what these medics are doing. They're doing life-saving skills. They're doing what physicians do in ERs at 80 miles an hour. It's fascinating. Like I did salad on I mean, well, you know what salad, I might have did it upside down, but I flipped it around. I mean, it's fascinating work. We need to put value into that. We need to put value back into EMS workers and make them feel it without putting arrogance into it.
I feel like, so retention, like everybody's like, oh, the retention rate.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many places I know that are like, if we get 2 to 3 years out of them, if we get 3
Oh, I
4
hate
years
that.
out of them,
I hate hearing
that's
that.
good, or we're a training department, or we're a,
Step up department.
like, and I've always said, how do we fix that? Like, how do we fix people wanting to leave? And, oh, well, they just go to a bigger, better department. What's bigger and better? Pay? Okay, let's go argue our butts off let's get close. I know my agency's not going to pay as much as this agency or whatever,
Yeah.
but if I can be close, if you can say it's a $10,000 gap, if you can get me $4,000 and I can stay happy and have time with my family and not have to do this and that, and I'll happily take the little bit less money to be happier. Like, so figure that out. Quit saying 2 to 3 years we'll be happy with. If we give 2 to 3 years, what that tells me is you spent X amount of dollars for somebody to have this uniform, this training, this car, and in 2 to 3 years you figure that they've paid those debts off, and so you're good with them going. No, let's figure it out. How do I make a 20-year agency?
Or return on investment is what they look at.
Yeah.
I put $20,000 into you. I need at least $60,000 work, which is interesting that you brought up administration. You brought up the chief of the department, the fire department, of kind of adjacent to where you were working prior. And that's usually kind of how we end all these conversations. We go to the administration side and we talk about what are things we could change. You know, we have our little magic wand, we wave it and boom, something gets fixed. So you both brought up the points of your administration saying, hey, if we get X amount of time out of them, or your administration not valuing you leaving versus outside administrations bringing that up. So what's one thing that the administrations in police, and I'll talk about fire and then EMS, that what do you think they could change to help fix this? What's the fix? Is there one fix? Is it multiple? It's a lot of road work, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to take a 20-minute break. We'll come back.
Commercial.
Yeah.
Man, what's the fix? I think, and I think I've said this before, going in and fighting for us and figuring out what needs to change, and that's just sit and listen to your people throughout the week and you'll find out what needs to change. It may not be exactly what we say, but you'll figure it out and then act on it. Let's talk about retention, like the 2 to 3 years, whether it be the money or the schedule. Our agency just recently heard us about our schedule, and the first week was rough. We went to, 12 hours and this different days. First week was rough for some of us because we came off of a 5-day week. For example, I was on Thursday. I worked Monday through Friday. Thursday, they called me, said, take the day off, come back Saturday. You're going to work another 4 and at 12 hours. They heard us. And the first week was rough, but people are enjoying it. People are liking it. The moods changed a little bit. So just take those small few things and go fight for us. Go listen to us. Go just listen. Just go change those few things. I don't need you to move the earth.
No.
I just need you to move a few things. And so if you're listening, boss, those meetings you go to advocate for us, fight for us. Like that it just I keep coming back to that. Just fight for us.
Yeah. And they may never get anywhere, but just the pure fact that they're showing up and they're putting the best interest of their direct reports out there is fantastic. With fire services, most of them are city-based. So then you start getting the different layers of, you're running, your call volume's increasing. Well, now we need more stations. We need more people. Personnel cost money. Stations cost money. Fire apparatus cost money. Equipment cost money. Everything to put on there costs money. And then so now it goes to, is it in the budget? Or do we need bonds? Or do we have to increase taxes? Now it's city council. Now it's across the city. And you're having to convince at every step, every person has to be on the same page to reach that goal. If you have one person that's not bought in or one person that says, oh, we're doing just fine with what we have, you're never going to have that change. Right. And so it's not so much when we say the word administrators on this show, it's not so much saying your chief or your lieutenant or your captain. It's everybody that has any impact from the top to the bottom. And that's the citizens. Essentially with fire and police, citizens have the greatest impact of all because you get 50, 60,000 citizens in a good sized town. And they start all having the same complaints about, hey, why is it taking so long for fire to get here? Why is it taking so long for an officer to respond? Your city council is going to start moving. Your mayor's going to start moving because that's a thumb that they're sticking on your head, versus 2 or 3 firefighters complaining or, one council person being upset about it. I think it takes a lot to affect that change for us. And I don't know if it's the same for you all to get those things moved. Because, you could have a fire chief or you could have a police chief that goes in there and says, hey, I need $5,000 more a year for all my employees. And, the counselor, whoever's above that just says, yeah, we don't have any money. We're broke. They're out there fighting for it, but it's getting everybody to understand why we need that stuff. We've got people leaving, we need greater level of services. We need more stations, more employees, more apparatus, EMS, you need more trucks. As the cities grow, it's surprising as how many houses get built on a daily basis in Oklahoma, but that number never matches, right? We look at that growth and it's super slow in public safety as a whole, but you can put up a housing addition, a whole section, 4,000 or 5,000 houses are up in 2 years, but you're still sitting right here, right? That demand is increasing. That age population is increasing, but we don't have the responders to it. I think that's where we get a lot of that quote unquote, that burnout, is because we see, you drive down the road, you drive down I-35 right now, and essentially it's Edmond, Oklahoma City, Moore, Norman, right?
Mhm.
Just one long name. There's nothing else in between it, right? And we're getting real close to Noble. We're getting real close to encroaching almost every city straight down 35. But then from our perspectives, we see all that change, but we don't see any change this way.
Yeah.
I think that's where that gets that kind of that, not burnout, but you get disenchanted a little bit,
Mhm.
that things are just going to remain status quo.
Yeah. You can't keep it status quo as it grows. That's unrealistic expectations. And you have to have accountability. You can't stick your head in the sand. You have to get out from behind your desk and from behind your meetings. And you can't be afraid of talking and hearing your team. If you're going to choose to be a leader, you need to lead and hear your team, because they have a lot to say. CISM should be mandatory. I agree. I support every time you've brought that up. I don't know why we aren't. I've been through multiple CISM debriefings. Never once have I felt judged in those. It's an opportunity for people to ask questions, because multiple times those things go on, and it's an opportunity for law enforcement to say, hey, I didn't understand how this went on. Can you help me understand that, to clear air, so people can understand. Because nobody wants to go home after a bad call and wonder, I don't understand why that happened. And that those wheels get to turning and think, well, maybe this would have went differently if somebody had done that. And then, because that's not healthy.